All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Doing skill 21 today, graphing quadratic equations, graphing parabolas. So let's review what we already know about parabolas. We know some characteristics about parabolas from the last section. For example, this one, we know the direction is up because a is greater than 1. A is the number in front of the x squared, right? So a is greater than 0. So it points up. If a was less than 0, it would point down. It would be flipped over. We need to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is down here at the -3. It is also in the equation at the -3 at the end. It's the same kind of y-intercept we had for slope-intercept form. Whatever is added and subtracted at the end is the y-intercept. So there's our y-intercept, 0, -3. We also have x-intercepts, known as zeros, and roots. They're here, and there are 2 of them usually. Sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's none actually. These are, let's see, -1, 0, and 3, 0. We have a line of symmetry that goes right down the middle, right here, and it's always an x equals equation. This one happens to be x equals, what number is that? 1. So x equals 1. And then the vertex is always the highest or lowest point of the function. This one happens to be 1, -4. So we know all of this stuff from the last section. We kind of know what the graph is supposed to look like. We have this line of symmetry and a vertex and these zeros and these other points on the graph, these top green dots up here. But we haven't found them ourselves, which is what we're going to do today. So here's our steps for finding or for graphing a parabola. First thing we need to do is put the equation in standard form, which means y equals. So if we're gonna get it in standard form, we're gonna get y by itself. We need to add 7 to both sides. So we end up with y equals x squared plus 8x plus 7. We need to find the x-intercept, step 2, find the x-intercepts by substituting 0 for y. We have 2 choices for how we're going to solve. We're going to do one of each. We can solve by factoring or quadratic formula, which we already know. So let's see what this looks like. Find the x-intercepts by substituting for 0, and then we need to solve. So put 0 in for y. We'll put the y on the other side and make it equal to 0 so it looks like the ones we've done before. And then we're going to factor. So we need to know 2 numbers that multiply to make 7, that also make 8. So this is when we did, let's see, a times b, so 1 times 7 is 7. So we need that number, and then we need 2 numbers that add to make 8. So I think those 2 numbers are 7 and 1. So now our equation looks like this. We took the 8x apart, and then we put these in groups, right? Factor by grouping. So we have a group here and then a group here. We can divide this group by x, and we can divide this group by positive 7. So now we have x times x plus 1 plus 7 times x plus 1. So we have x plus 7 times x plus 1 equals 0, just like we had before. We are solving this, so we need to finish making these 2 little equations and solve the 2 little equations. So we need x plus 7 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 7, just like we did when we learned these the first time. X equals -7. Minus 1, x equals -1. So there we go. X equals -7 and x equals -1. We should write these as ordered pairs this time because we are going to graph it. So -7, 0, -1, 0. All right, so that's step 2. We're going to come back for those in just a minute. All right, step 3, find the axis of symmetry by using the equation x equals negative b over 2a. These are the same b and a that we already talked about at the beginning. So what do we get if we do that? We have x equals negative 8 over 2 times 1. So b is 8 and a is 1. We just have to solve it. So we get negative 8 over 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Step 4, plug the value you got for x back into the equation to find y. So we're going to take that negative 4, we're going to plug it in, we're going to see what happens. We're trying to find the vertex. So if we put negative 4 into the equation, we get negative 4 squared plus 8 times negative 4 plus 7. Negative 4 squared means negative 4 times negative 4, so that's positive 16. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32 plus 7. Negative 16 plus 32, or 16 minus 32 is negative 16. Negative 16 plus 7. Y equals negative 9. So then this is our vertex, negative 4, negative 9. That's our vertex. We just found the vertex for the graph. All right, so let's see what we can do next. Let's see. Step 5, a table with points and graphs. So we already know a few things. We already know we have ordered pairs of negative 7, 0, negative 1, 0. These are our zeros. We already know the vertex, negative 4, negative 9. This is the vertex. So far, our graph looks something like this. The negative 4 is our line of symmetry, that green line, and the orange dots are the ones we already know. We know the zeros, and we know the vertex. So we need to find one more point, and then we can make a mirror image of that point. So let's do negative 2. Let's see what happens if we put negative 2 in. Negative 2 squared plus 8 times negative 2 plus 7. So negative 2 squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Plus negative 16 plus 7. So that makes negative 12 plus 7 equals negative 5. Negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we can graph that dot. And a mirror image for that dot, 1, 2 to get to the line, and 1, 2 to get to the other side of the line. So now we have enough to make our graph. It should look something like that. The red dots there are the new ones we just found. The orange dots are the zeros that we already had. And the bottom dot is called the vertex. We already had that one. So there's our graph. Let's try another one. Same thing, all the same steps. Let's go through all the same steps again. Step 1, put the equation in standard form. This one is already in standard form, so we don't have to do any work. Find the x-intercepts by substituting 0 for y, or solve by factoring or quadratic formula. We just did a factoring problem, so now we're going to try a quadratic formula problem. So here's our quadratic formula. We need to substitute a, b, and c in first. We end up with this. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So 2 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times 4 over 2 times negative 1. Just like before, it's not any different than the ones we've already done in the past. So then we end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 20 over negative 2. Square root of 20 is not a perfect number that we know the square root of. So we're going to get a decimal when we put it in the calculator. And then we end up with negative 1.23607 and 3.23607. These are our zeros, just like they were the last problem. So we're going to have ordered pairs then for these that are negative 1.20 and 3.20. So we're going to have to graph them. They'll be in between. They're not going to be right on a whole number, right? So negative 1.2 would be between negative 2 and negative 1. 3.2 is going to be between 3 and 4. All right, so let's keep going. Find the axis of symmetry by using x equals negative b over 2a, same as we did last time. In this case, we get negative 2 over 2 times negative 1 makes 1. It makes negative 2 over negative 2, which makes 1. All right, so we put 1 into the equation. 1 squared is 1, 2 times 1 is 2. If we solve this, so we have negative 1 plus 2 plus 4, which equals 5. So now we have our vertex. Our vertex is going to be 1, 5. All right, so we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're going to put the things in that we already know. So we can graph our axis of symmetry and our vertex. So we have negative 1.2 and 0 and 3.2 and 0. Those are our zeros from when we solved. We have our vertex is 1, 5. And we need another point on the graph. There are easy points to put in. We can put 0 in, we can put 2 in, we can put negative 1 in. Let's just put 0 in and see what happens. So we're just going to put 0 in and see what happens. Let's see, we're putting 0 into the equation. So 0 equals negative 0 squared plus 2 times 0 plus 4. These are both zeros, so we get 0, 4. So we're going to put a dot here, and then we're going to make a mirror image of it on the other side, and it's going to be over here. Now we have enough to make our graph. Our graph should look something like this. We're going to do number 3 in class. Hopefully you understand all the steps. I know there are quite a few steps, but if you just do each step one at a time, you will eventually create a graph. Make sure you're ready to go. Be ready to ask questions. If you have questions, we will do number 3 in class together.